I'm standing here at Checagou, Illinois at a place called Jackson Park, and behind me is what's called the Museum of Science and Industry. The story about this building and this park is incredible. I want to show it to you up close. And what I was facing while I was talking to you there is this water, but right up to the water are these steps, and right behind these steps is this massive building said to have been built for the 1893 World's Fair as the Palace of Fine Arts. Of all the buildings that were built, which the number is actually 200 buildings, all in this area, it was called the White City. This is really the only one that remains, and they say that it is the only one that was made with brick underneath the plaster facade on the outside. They say that all these buildings were built around this entire huge park of a plaster facade to look like white marble. Was it in fact a plaster facade, and they tore them all down after the World's Fair, which was incredible, amazing? Supposedly people came from all over the world, had moving sidewalks, just incredible. I'm going to show you pictures of this. But were these buildings built all around here? Were they actually an ancient city, a millennial city, an old world city that was built permanent, and they've been completely removed and torn down, with this being the only one that remains? To see this building up close and what it would take to have built this, saying that this was built only for the World's Fair, when this building is rock solid, it would have taken years to build this at that time. The 1800s. This building is much like the building I profiled in Kansas City called the Nelson Atkins Museum. These columns are massive, and most likely on the inside brick, but also not only are the columns massive and everything in here massive, this building has all the same symbols that are on every other building of the acanthus. And you see that above the doors. And speaking of the doors, these doors are tons. You can move one. They're on hinges, but it is so massive and solid. The feel of it, moving it, is like pulling on a huge barbell of weight. They're solid, not a thin facade, but they feel like solid iron or bronze. And you can see that they closed over that massive doorway, and it looks like later this insert was put in. Now when you look inside, they've completely basically done the equivalent of sheetrocking everything and turning it into a museum that is like some of these ones you'll see in towns that have a lot of little exhibits, and there's one called Toy Maker, and the building on the inside is nothing compared to the real story, which is out here and around this park. This building obviously is solid, just solid as a rock, and to say it was just built for a temporary World's Fair that supposedly had millions of people coming to it in the late 1800s from all over the world. Now, how would that be? Think about that. You're talking about the late 1800s. You're going to come on a boat. There's the acanthus symbols, just like every other building right there, that signify the rulership of the ones that really built the building. And you can see in so many other videos I've done, I talk about that extensively. The columns have the same symbol at the top, which is the scroll being opened by the column. And there is only one that was said to have been able to open the scroll symbolically. The Lion of the tribe of Judah in the Bible. You see the parapet fences on the top. So this building is just like all the other buildings I've profiled, and rock solid and huge, and the amount of time it would have taken to construct this, the notion that it was just temporary. And the reason why they say this one in particular was not temporary, but it remains, is because other countries around the world did not want their art displayed in a building that wasn't fireproof. That's the story given. People love stories. People love to believe stories. These are definitely stories. Are they true stories? Do you have to believe them and take them as true, or do you want to look at what's in front of you and let your eyes and your common sense tell you what's going on? Was this a temporary setup with 200 buildings around this entire area? And we're going to walk around and look at some of the places and the map of what was and what is now, and you'll be able to see it all up close. You can see that this is extensive right here. And also here at the front of the building, in addition to the other symbols, again at the top is the lion, just as on all the other buildings. And the one in the Bible that was deemed worthy to open the scroll, which that column symbolizes, was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which was Jesus Christ, which is the kingdom that would have built all these buildings. Now, this one remains, and it's said to have been an entrance, and then you come here and walk around to the other, I guess, 199 buildings that have been torn down because they say they were made from plaster and temporary. You be the judge of whether you believe that. We're going to go around to the other side of the building and take a look, and then go around the grounds. And when you see these majestic buildings in old historical pictures and then realize they're on the very grounds that we're walking around, including the building we're looking at, it's just incredible. We're going to continue walking around this building we're looking at, and then I'm going to show you what currently sits in the location of all these buildings. And as we round this corner, you can see just the massive expanse of this building, and the notion that it was just built only for a temporary show to house art of other nations in the world with this massive permanence seems ludicrous, especially in light of the fact that the symbols all over the building signify the kingdom of Jesus Christ, but yet that's never so much as even mentioned. And you can see this part continues on, this building, I should say, continues on around. And as we come to the top here, on the west side, we see all the same symbols going up. And around, and some would say that the original building was actually demolished and this was built in the late 30s. Or there's others who say that just the core remained and they built all these things in the late 30s. But the history that you look at online says this was the last standing building, although what they say would have been an imitation of white marble, which is plaster, made to look like white marble, actually has been torn off now. Well, most likely anything that was white marble was actually white marble, just like we've seen in the other buildings that I've done, like the Capitol building now at Minnesota, which is white marble. And these doors just look ancient. This building was deserted for a long time. And now we just came from the west edge of that part of the building, and this continues on and on around this portion. This is like at least an entire city block of a building. And still, as we walk around, we see very clearly the symbolism that goes entirely around the building. And those symbols don't mean nothing. They mean something. And we're right adjacent to the Great Lakes. Right here, the lake is right about 400 yards away, right across the roadway there where the car just went by. And now you can see the real size of this building. Just incredibly large, starting right here. That's the main entrance. And it continues on all the way down. That anyone would even be able to entertain a story that this was made for a World's Fair only completely defies any laws of construction, cost, time involved, and reality in general. This is a massive encampment, really. It's just huge. You can see the dome in the middle. This is larger than many massive state capitol buildings. And remember, this was one of what they said were 200 buildings. The rest all having been demolished because supposedly they were plaster. As if they were something like paper mache buildings. Well, in the old pictures you can see the tree growth outside these buildings is much longer than anything that was done temporary. The trees are much higher in the old pictures. And you can take a look at some of the old pictures I'm going to show and use your judgment of exactly what you're looking at. Here on this side, the symbolism continues all the way around. Lion, the scrolls, the acanthus,
And as you can see in this shot, the green grass, the buildings in the distance, they've all been built on land in which the old world buildings were completely destroyed. As you can see in this old picture, I marked the location where the shot took place. From the other direction now, looking back towards where the shot was, everything has been destroyed. The trees, the buildings, the railroad on the left, everything.
And here we are at the northeast corner, and from here you can see the main entrance, and then way down there the other end, which mirrors this end. Just a massive complex. And right across the road right there is Lake Michigan. Can't quite see it from here, but that construction right there is right next to it.
And in this map from 1893, you can see where I was standing in the video looking towards the lake at the end of the arrow in the upper right corner. And for a perspective on just how huge these grounds are, the building that I just walked around in the video is at the end of the arrow. That complex right there sitting on that end pond is the entire building, and it was huge. So when you look around this complex, you can see just how massive some of these buildings are. And in the lower right corner, there's a moving sidewalk that goes out into Lake Michigan. This is really just absolutely incredible.
And here we are now standing across the water from where we started, which is called the North Pond. This is just one small area of water that all these buildings continued around. And we're just seeing the middle part of the building. They go clear down to the ends and around where you can't see, but you saw from the front. And all of these grounds on the map that I'm putting up were filled with buildings that are completely obliterated and gone. And now we're looking at the south side of that building in front of the North Pond. The bridge is here, and it's closed off now, but this is the water that continues on in the map all the way down. And the map can look kind of small, but this is a really huge area. We're going to come down here to see really what this looks like on the water. And you can see that it's quite a lake. Just imagine this lake with continual, almost seemingly white marble buildings built all over, all the way around.
And this is that same exact lake from the other end looking back towards where we were shooting from. And you can see the majestic buildings just all around. It's really amazing to view these old pictures and then look now from the shoreline.
And you'll see in the map there were other crossways, walkways across here that are no longer remaining. And of course, this wasn't a parking lot. It was glorious buildings right on the shores of Lake Michigan.
And on this bird's eye view, you can see where we're walking at the end of the white arrow, looking towards Lake Michigan, which on this representation is at the bottom, but is actually east.
And we're going to go down to the crossing here that you can see in the map, because on the other side of this crossing is one of the largest buildings that you could imagine, longer than this entire lake in one building. And you'll see it on the map. And now coming from the bridge that we just walked over and down from, we're coming to the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building. You'll see the giant rectangle on the map. And that giant rectangle is now a driving range. This entire area through the trees, which is a driving range, was entirely one building right next to the water. And of course, you can't get in there and dig or do anything like that to see if you could find anything. But the entire area has been turned into a driving range. And across on the other side of the water, it's been turned into a golf course. And of course, these are tennis courts. You can see how often they get use. It's just like they came up with something to stick on top of here to be a park that nobody has any use for. Really nothing going on here. They haven't even so much as taken them and converted them to pickleball like they have everywhere else. There's no use. But it is a park now, so there can't be a whole lot of exploring going on. But this entire area, just a glorious kingdom as evidenced in the pictures. And now, just basically a country pond, although not in the country. They've made it look like that with the overgrowth, which really doesn't exist too many places around, but if you just as well bury something and leave it alone, this is what has happened with this location. And you can look on the maps, we're right across from Lake Michigan, and right here on the map you can see what was here before and all the way around. The amazing thing is they had moving sidewalks that went out on the peninsula. A little further down there was a pier. When you get to that pier, there was a moving sidewalk, and moving sidewalks all around that took you out on the pier. Really, really high tech in a time that's said to be really, really low tech. Now this area is on the map, and you can find it on there, and you'll see that there were piers, things that went out on the water, and this entire area was buildings. It would be said that it was temporary buildings. 199 buildings. Even if they were temporary, which is
completely ridiculous.
Just to build temporary buildings be a massive undertaking. You're going to have to use at least some sort of stick to build the structure of the building, and isn't that essentially what we do now with 2x4s? How much more temporary can you make a building? There has to be a structure. You use a 1x2 instead of a 2x4. It's not going to be that much different in the amount of work and cost involved in building it. A paper mache building has to have some structure. A plaster building. Essentially, that's what old construction did with plaster, is they put plaster up over chicken wire or some structure on the wall, and they were plaster walls. They didn't have drywall, but they definitely were not temporary, and they definitely took a long time to build and quite some cost. This wasn't like throwing up a bounce house for your kids on their birthday for one day. This was an entire city built that seemingly looked like white marble but was plaster. Does that sound feasible? Or are we talking about a glorious city sitting right here that was actually white marble and has been completely demolished? Another point of view would be that none of it existed and the pictures aren't real, and the only real building is the one at the end, and that's an entire story just to cover all of that up, to make you not think too much about that building that still remains that we just looked at. Would that be a possibility? You know, many cities are said to have had fires and burned everything down, pretty much all of the cities. But yet the buildings that are there that they said they rebuilt obviously are much, much older. And so did the fires actually ever really happen, or is that a cover story for what remains? In the same way that this glorious building stands and remains. Marble buildings would be very tough to tear down. So what are we really looking at in this park?
And just what is buried underneath our feet?
Post your thoughts down below. The one thing we do know is right now we are definitely looking at this building, which is fantastic and incredible. Hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.